Well, good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful. Let's do that again. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, yeah, let's feel that energy. I know it's after lunch. We've had so much amazing conversation so far and great experiences and networking, and we are just getting going. So thank you all for joining us today, this afternoon. We have this really incredible panel conversation, and we want to emphasize the conversation part of that. We will have the opportunity to be dialoguing with these experts and great wisdom leaders in urban agriculture. But we also want to pass the opportunity for you to ask questions and engage in dialogue as wisdom keepers as well in urban agriculture. So I'm just going to begin a little bit here, just introducing myself. I am Kim Nawalny. I use she, her pronouns. I am a professor at Virginia Tech. I'm also the director of our Virginia Tech Center for Food Systems and Community Transformation. It is a mouthful, but every word counts. And we are really excited to be part of the NUag family as one of the team members to really work across the country with supporting urban agriculture with Virginia State University, Time Incorporated, Cornell University, USDA. Also have the rare opportunity to wear two hats. Virginia Tech and Virginia State University is also a cooperator, one of the original 17 projects that are leading urban agriculture in our state. And so, but in this capacity, I'm going to probably use both hats because I think they both matter and really get to be in community with colleagues who are very, very connected to their work on the ground. And we're just going to really kind of use that. You all know what a rhizome is? All right, I love when I can do rhizome metaphors with people who know, right? We're rhizomials, right? We're all connecting. The mycorrhizes are connecting between us. So that's our goal today, is to continue to grow those networks and grow our opportunities and really kind of take a moment to appreciate the hard work, the ethics, the values that you bring forward. So with that, let's just jump into it. I'm going to actually ask each panelist to introduce themselves in their own words, how you like to be identified, but a couple maybe pointers. I would recommend just making sure folk know where you are, where you located, because we have folk all across the country. I could tell you where they are, but it's more fun to hear it from you. And they're also all cooperators who have different projects across the U.S. right now of the original 17 cooperator group. That being said, so organization, your farm, however you want to be identified, also your role in the project that you're leading and co-leading, and third part, what makes urban agriculture special to you? It's a little personal. Bring your person into it as much as you wish, and then we have a whole bunch of more questions to go from there. Okay. So, Mina.
I'll go first. Hi. Okay, yeah, it works. Hi, everybody. My name is Mina Sek. I use she, her pronouns, and I am based out of New Orleans. I work for an organization called Sprout, and we are one of the cooperators, and Terrence, you shouted it out yourself because I was going to shout out Terrence over there. He is the lead of our cooperator program, which is the microgrant fund through the FSA. We are in our first year. We're going through lots of it, so I want to make sure we give Terrence his flowers over there because it is quite a process, as as you all know. But I'm the community food director at Sprout, so this program falls under the community food department. But we do a lot more within that programming. We have a community garden, which we're now actually transitioning to a larger community farm on the Greenway, which is city-owned property in New Orleans. So that's kind of a big deal. And so we have that project. We also do a lot of technical assistance to farmers and growers throughout the surrounding parishes as well as Orleans. And that's just my department. Our organization does a lot of statewide work, but I will be here for an hour if I talk to you about our entire organization. They do a lot of work. But what makes urban agriculture important to me? Again, a big answer that I could give, but to shorten it, I just think that food is one of those non-negotiable things. It's one of those things that everybody has in common. It's the one thing that we all have to have, right? We don't have to have music. We need music. I think art is so important, and some would argue with me that we do need art, right? I'm not saying we don't need the arts. That's not at all what I'm saying, but I'm saying that you can't physically live without food. And so that's why it's so important to me, and why I care about it and I want to fight for it, because we won't physically be able to survive without it. So that is me, and I will pass it.
Thank you. We have a mischief maker up here. I just want to call him out right now. I'm Susie Marshall, and she, her pronouns. I am based in Dallas, Texas. I'm actually Dallas County born and raised. I have been outside of Texas, okay? Sometimes in these spaces, I feel like I have to be like the representative of all the positive things in Texas, because there are lots. You might have to look to find them, but there are lots. I am the founder and executive director of Grow North Texas. We are a local food systems organization that primarily works on increasing local food production and figuring out how that local food can provide access to, like we can remove barriers to get that local food to communities that don't have good food access, fresh produce access primarily. I did not intend to build an organization like this. I didn't even intend to get into this work. It was all by accident. But one of the things that brought me into, that kind of sucked me into it, was early on. This is my 21st year somehow of doing the food and agriculture work, and a farmer who grew sweet potatoes said, I can't get insurance. And I thought, why can the people who grow the food that keeps us healthy not have the supports that they need to continue to grow the food that keeps us healthy, right? So anyway, that whole dichotomy eventually sent me down a path. Grow North Texas has an urban farm project. We are a cooperator. We have Farm Success, which is our farmer education and outreach technical assistance program. We also have a community orcharding program as an affiliate of the Giving Grove in Kansas City. And we also facilitate the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which is the primary way that we are getting that local food to families that benefit from their produce. Why is urban agriculture special to me? Because I think that, like was said, we all eat, but urban agriculture gives us a way to reclaim it for ourselves, to come together in community in ways that other things don't. One of the things about local agriculture in Texas is it's where all of the different ideologies cross. And it's very obvious, and like I've been in leadership positions where I didn't know what that person was going to come up and say to me. I didn't know if they were coming from the far right, if they were coming from the far left, or somewhere in between. And I realized how important that is for us as a society to be able to come together around something common. And so I think that's one of the things about, not only can urban agriculture give communities their food sovereignty, but it also has opportunities for us to come together around, and local food systems in general come around together through our communities and build our communities together. Gary.
Thank you, Susie. I'm Gary Hampton. I'm from the Twin Cities, St. Paul. I'm with Renewing the Countryside. I co-manage the Urban Ag Initiative for the Twin Cities. If you hear a twang, I'm not from Texas. I'm from West Virginia originally. I'm from West Virginia originally, and a transplant. So with Renewing the Countryside, we're doing a microgrant program, but we're doing far more than that. We're also going to be doing some business planning and farmer readiness to be able to take advantage of USDA programs, those programs that are applicable and appropriate for urban ag and fit what urban ag farmers and growers and producers need. And so I'm also from the co-op space. I see Dr. Jazz with National Black Food and Justice Alliance. I'm part of a worker-owner co-op. Also, I chair the Association of Cooperative Educators board out of Canada as well. And then also I'm involved with land access, collective landholding models, and tenureship, equitable land tenureship as well in the Twin Cities. So I was in those spaces before I got into this position, and I'm like, we're looking at land access, we're looking at, these urban areas. And so it's like that was through the commons approach. And people were talking earlier, what does land access look like for urban farmers? And so I look at the black churches. Your churches are largest landholding models or folks in the country. And then is looking at your public commons, your DOT lands, your public parks, and different things like that. And so what does those tenure and relationships look like, for folks to really develop the soil and get it to a point to where, it's beyond that 1, 3, or 5 year, but like we need that 10, 15, 20 year, 30 year tenureship agreements, et cetera. So getting involved in that work and then connecting like, okay, now we're working with the farmers. We have a pool of farmers that are looking for land, and then we can just kind of connect and braid these different ecosystems. And so what brought me into urban ag? It wasn't a chosen path. I came from tech and finance, and along the way, I got exposed to economic development, workforce development, and those different things. And so is everything that's happening around urban ag is all of those things. It is tech, it is finance, it is economics, it is workforce development. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is shifting that narrative around urban ag. Looking at it as an economic solution, a workforce development, job creation. Why don't we look at urban ag and growers, the labor force, as green landscaping and design? Oh, wow, now we fall into the green jobs. Now we have apprenticeship pathways. So there's all of these different elements that really come into play that we can really look at. So, I'm just happy to be here, and I just appreciate the opportunity for us to share and connect with everybody in the room and what we do as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Keely. I work for the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, also known as CAF. We are a statewide organization in California. I am the policy and organizing manager, and so a lot of what I do involves policy advocacy throughout the state, but also at the local level. I've only been with CAF since February, and so the microgrant program that we are doing with FSA with this Cooperator initiative predates my time, so I'm trying to sort of stand up a lot of the programs that are going with that. So we are doing microgrants, as other people are doing as well. We have 24 selected for this year going out the door. We are also doing a fellowship program, and we are working with local partners in the Bay Area and LA. We are one of the cooperators that have 2 cities. CAF does a lot of different aspects of agriculture. So primarily we are interested in engaging with small family farmers and saving, small agriculture, small farms throughout the state of California, especially in the wake of a lot of corporate takeover. And we do farmer services, farm to market, tech hub stuff, and then a lot of like ecological farming services, pest management, things like that. So on the policy side, we're really engaging with the legislature in our local cities and counties, especially around land access and water issues. I am from the Midwest. I moved to California from the Twin Cities. I lived in Minneapolis and was on the Minneapolis Food Policy Council and did some conservation agriculture work. So that is definitely a change in how I think about water access since, living along the Mississippi versus living in a much different climate in Southern California. But I'm interested in urban agriculture because I was an urban farmer in New York City for a long time through community gardens and had my own small rooftop farm about 10 years ago, and kind of came into that through my AmeriCorps program through the city of New York, and was working with residents in public housing New York City's public housing system, known as NYCHA, has the most amount of land throughout the 5 boroughs. So there's a lot of opportunity, and the programs there have grown a lot in the last decade, which is just really important in gaining access to land for youth and for economic drivers and sustainability throughout the city. And so when I started my small farm, I really had to understand and try to overcome a lot of barriers as a young person, as a new farmer. My youth was on a dairy farm, which is very different from New York City, and just trying to understand the political implications of trying to navigate a system that doesn't necessarily want to work for you. So we grew hops, we grew microgreens, salad greens, and had a lot of community events. But it's also acknowledging when you're not from a space and when you're, a white person going into a lot of communities and trying to build partnerships or relationships, it really comes with building trust. And so having that acknowledgement and understanding your place is really has been a great journey as a young AmeriCorps person, and then working through a lot of these barriers as a business owner. So, yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for setting the tone. This is really encouraging, making us want to know more about your work, and which is what we're going to do next. This session is titled Community-Based Urban Agriculture. And one might argue that community-based agriculture and urban agriculture are somewhat synonymous in some ways, and perhaps in very importantly nuanced ways. And what I'd like to kind of explore together next is the ways in which the communities in which you are engaged in, you are part of, advocate alongside, how do they show up in the work? How does the role of community, and that's a pluralistic idea, how does community show up in your urban agriculture work? And I'll let whoever likes to begin.
I'll just start and then we'll pass it. In our cooperative agreement, like I said, we have 2 cities, so we have 2 partners in each, Food Access LA and the LA Food Policy Council in LA, obviously. In the Bay Area, we have Agroecology Commons and Vegilution, and so I can't do any work in trying to bridge the gap between FSA and USDA and NRCS with urban growers without the people who are working in those communities. And so CAF is a statewide org. Yes, we work a lot with farmers, but people who have been working in the community for decades around these issues, they're the ones that know where those nuances lie and how we can actually try to engage and connect. And so I think the number one thing is just finding community partners and acknowledging that other people know more than you about a lot of these issues, and that each city and municipality has its own unique challenges. So just listening, building trust, and kind of understanding that things change, and you might set out to do something and you have to be flexible and adapt, and just try to do the best you can to build community and those bridges.
Thank you. So how does community show up in our work? They show up in our team. Our team consists of folks from the community, myself included. I live there, so I'm part of that community. I've been embraced by the community and accepted as well, so that's a good thing. But then is through our steering committee. We didn't go to agencies looking for folks. We went to the community looking for folks to join our steering committee. And, everything that we do is guided by the steering committee, down to the language around equity and different things of that nature through our grant applications, et cetera, all gets input from our steering committee. If we draft it up, we don't send it out until our steering committee says, hey, look at this, or gives us the thumbs up. So we take that voice of the community as they represent the community, and they're from across the urban ag community. So, and that's a big thing. We have growers and farmers, other stakeholders from university, et cetera, that are part of that steering committee when we went through our grant process. They were part of helping us in co-designing and co-creating that grant process. We came up with the framing of what we thought would work, and then as we got that input as well. So really valuing the voice of the community helped us and is helping us center the community as we design our program forward, as we need to look at pivoting going forward, and then as also as we look for answers, because they are the experts. Those individuals that are out there actually with their hands in the soil every day are those experts that really know what's going to work for them, what's not going to work for them. And so as we have to be very keen and very intentional at listening to what they say. Sometimes we have to read between the lines to make sure that we understand and we have clarity, and then we may have to go back and get that clarity as well. And then, the relationships, everybody on our team has some element of relationships out in the community. We're not sitting behind Zoom. We're not sitting behind a cooperative agreement. We're actually out there. If it means driving, somebody's having something and they want you to show up, they got the MDA or USDA coming out, I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna take that 2-hour drive for an hour visit and a 2-hour drive back on 65 miles, because we got a 100-mile radius, to show up and be supportive, to hear you out, to see what you're doing, what the needs are, et cetera, because we have the urban space in the Twin Cities, but then there's also that's not going to get it when we look at food sovereignty, when we look at the food systems. We're going to have to look at that larger place-based areas of beyond 50 to 100 miles, because then that's where we can really develop that local food system and really understand that local food system. And so as we can bridge that urban to rural divide. And then as one of the things, and I'll pass it on, is let's start looking at urban and agriculture from an agroecological lens. Because it encompasses so much more than just growing the food. We talk about soil, we talk about water, we talk about economics, we talk about land. And so the human aspect. So all of those elements are what urban agriculture is, can be, and will be. And so is like maybe embracing that also opens up our own lenses as we serve our communities, and then also helps the community understand that it's growing food in the backyard, is doing this, but then there's so much other opportunities for impact that may not show up in the food that you consume, but shows up in the work and the growing that you've done and that you've completed. So thank you.
In Dallas, I was surprised that Dallas was chosen in the first round of the urban centers, because the logical place for urban agriculture in Texas is Austin. And maybe the view was, well, there's already a lot happening there. There's not as much need for development, so it's given us this huge opportunity. We've at least initially taken the approach, and I think the longevity of these agreements is going to allow us to adapt as, we've gotten into it, and then we go, oh, you know what, maybe we want to do it this way. And that is all going to be based on what the community's telling us and whether we see the opportunities and the needs from the feedback that we're getting. But we've taken initially this approach that we kind of know who some of the players are. We have a lot of people who are interested in getting started, or they're just tiptoeing into growing stuff, or starting barely to sell at a farmer's market. And so our approach is actually to provide a wide array of just skills and knowledge. We've recently had a basic construction class. So we're kind of piloting these things. We're working on small engine repair. Things that people who are going to be growing their own food and working in the community need to know, and they may not know. It's so much better if you go, oh, you know what? I need to change the oil in my tiller or my whatever, or I need to, fix this tool. I need to build a wash station, and I can do that for myself. So trying to give people skills like that, in addition to production planning and seasonality and all of the things about actually growing the food. So we're taking this kind of broad approach, and then our goal is to design kind of a tiered program where you've got some basic introductory stuff. You've got another level where people have started and they're humming along a little bit, and then you've got the folks that are ready to expand. So our level of like USDA engagement is not even near like a micro loan, an FSA micro loan. I think that's the right name. We're talking about maybe getting into EQIP, and it's been great to see the people that have gotten the farm numbers. You do a bunch of webinars, you've talked to people, and then all of a sudden you find out, 5 people have already gotten their farm numbers because they felt like this was an important step to make. And actually, that is one of the things that I've begun to talk about is, okay, the government is imperfect. There is a lot of history, there's a lot of harm that has happened there. However, if you can stomach it, to begin to step your foot into the system by saying, I'm here, and this is what I'm growing. If you're getting the farm number, you're staking your claim to USDA that I'm here. I don't have anything against anybody. People are going to not want to do that. That's fine, and I totally understand that. But I think for the people that are willing to do that, FSA, you walk into the FSA, the NRCS, the extension offices, and they say, well, we don't have anything for you, because people aren't saying, I'm here. And the more the people that can and feel comfortable doing that, the more USDA has the information to say, oh, we need programs. We need to make these work. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that people have begun to say, hey, NRCS, I want something that works for me. And then those of us in these positions have said, hey, NRCS, FSA, we need programs that work for the farmers that we're working with. So I think we also play a role in developing the future systems, that whether that's government connected or not government connected, we can do that, and we can play a role in that.
Great. So similarly to Gary and their micro-grant programming, we also have a funding and a steering committee. And so we have a 40-person funding committee for our micro-grant program that is built by farmers or other organizations, people that can also apply for the grant, and that was really important to us to make sure that they were building that program out with us and the rubric and like running everything by with everybody before we opened it up to the public, and just making sure that, there's countless hours of technical assistance calls, and just making sure that we're there to like answer questions so that people could form trust in us. Of course, there are a lot of urban producers and rural producers that we work with as an organization already, but through this process and through this program coming out, we've met so many more people that at least for myself, I don't want to speak for our organization as a whole, but for myself, it's like, I see that as an opportunity. I'm like, if there's so many people that are doing this work in the city that I've not met before, and I've not and they're doing this work, and we have a very big network and a large community of people that we work with and that we serve and that we bring into many of the things that we do, and it was really cool and eye-opening to see all of the people that still aren't a part of it. So I think that was something that we learned, and I think that's one of the bigger things about building community, is being able to recognize what you don't know and where you need to grow and where you can learn. And I think especially, again, our organization has been around for 10 years. So I'm very lucky that I've been with Sprout for almost 3 years, but I'm lucky that I entered in a place that is really stand 10 toes down in our morals and our values, right? Like, we honor our elders, we honor the people that have been doing this work, because urban ag in New Orleans has been happening for decades, we could all go down a history lesson right now. But for lack of better words, let's say decades, right? It's been happening for quite some time, and so, making sure that we're honoring the people that have been doing this work for a long time and bringing them into the conversation, and also like encouraging new people that, that they're welcome to come, and like just making sure we're building trust. And again, with that, I think being able to recognize where we're not doing a good job and how we're not touching people, and how, like, what can we continue to do, and not just listening to our stakeholders, because again, they are so important, but there's also like, a community of people that aren't in that, and I'm like, hey, wait, why aren't you, like, I feel like you should be a part of this, and you're not, like, what have we done wrong? Or maybe not wrong, but what are we not doing? Where are we lacking? Why aren't you in this group of wonderful growers? So that is something that, and to echo, like, a lot of the beautiful things that y'all have said are like, tactics that we take, bringing in people. But I think for myself to continue building the community, and, I've heard speakers earlier today, there's not a lot of young farmers, like, and so I think that is also something, just trying to get people excited about farming in our region, because we need more farmers for our future. Yeah.
I just want to lift up something that she said is before this initiative, there's a bunch of people out here doing this work that have been doing this work, and so is one of the things that we're doing, just like you all are, is recognizing that work that was already taking place, and, figuring out how to connect with those folks that are doing that work, and being intentional, because that's part of that community building. We're not going to get everybody, but we have to make sure that we give everybody the opportunity to connect and access the work that we're doing, and it comes through the relationships. Cooperation is trust. That comes before collaboration. You know what I mean? Cooperation is trust. That comes before transactions of those collaborations. You know what I mean? Cooperation is trust. That comes and leads to transformation. So as we're looking at this, is really connecting and really accepting what's happening before this, and don't let this work guide what we're trying to do in communities, but let communities guide what this work can do for the communities.
Well, I want to kind of uplift and really center the notion around trust. And really, I think many of us have heard the idiom, you can only go as fast as the speed of trust. And I want to recognize that here in sharing your experiences. I'd like to kind of take a deeper dive a little bit into the experiences that you're leading and you're connecting with. And perhaps, I do storytelling work, and we could probably do this in lots of different ways, but I want to just offer you the opportunity, if you would, share a time when, give not the example of, which works, but share a time when you felt your work in urban agriculture, the urban agriculture work you do, that you embody. When did that feel hopeful?
I can go because I have the mic. So I will go first. I hope you're ready. I think personally, some moments where I've been like, oh, wow, this is, so our organization does a lot of work for producers, right? Like in the role that we do, it's food systems focused, but we do have a community garden that is expanding to a community farm, and we have, so that is not, it's geared towards, community members, less about like technical assistance of like, this is how you're going to fill out this application and this is the program to go to, right? It's like, let's have fun and like learn some things and make bouquets together, right? So, and I think that's equally important. It's not the answer, but I think it's equally important to a robust food system. And there have been, and sometimes it can feel, I don't want to say frivolous, but it can feel just kind of like, okay, community garden, because everybody has their ideas about community gardens. But I've had multiple people come. I'm not going to tear up. I'm a Cancer, so if I tear up, don't mind me. But it's because it was like, whoa, like I didn't even know that was happening. I've had multiple people that have just been like, oh, like, I'm newer to the city, or I've been in the city for a while, or, you know, I'm from here, but I just, like, they come to the garden every week, and, like, how deeply it affects them on, like, such a level. Like, yes, they're harvesting food and they're having fun, and, like, yeah, we're drying flowers, but, like, that sense of togetherness, and that sense, and especially too because, you know, farming can be siloed, right? Like, you're out in your land, and, like, unless you're, like, going to market, you kind of spend a lot of time with yourself, and, like, if you're lucky, the people that also work on the farm with you. But in, you know, in the garden space, it's just really been really cool to see people just how much it impacts them when we don't even recognize what we're doing.
So I guess as I'm thinking about on the spot answer to this question, I guess I'm thinking about it I'm seeing it from a little bit different perspective, because I started doing the work with, like, in the early, you know, around 2010, 8, 10, somewhere in there. It kind of just happened. But there were some local farmers, there was a little bit of, there were a few things happening. We did not have an urban agriculture, local food systems thing happening in Dallas. And I knew we were already behind, way behind other parts of the country, because I'd been going to things and learning things. And so now I'm looking at things, and I have 2 staff people that are working on our part of our cooperative agreement, and they have come on not really knowing, you know, not having been in the journey with me, but I'm like, okay, y'all, we're going to do this thing, and here's how it works. And they're like, huh? And a year and a half later, they're like, oh yeah, I got this. And they're coming up with it's their ideas. And so I am able to see the passing of knowledge and initiative and growth. There are new projects happening in the community. We're doing our best to find ways to be, I can't think of the right verb, passing off resources, you know, funneling resources through into the community organizations that are on the ground doing more work than we can do different work than we can do on the ground, because they're in the communities of color. And how can we, as the organization that has become the big thing, which I never, like a few years ago, was like, oh, we are that big, like this is a new experience for me. And so then in my mind, my role has been, how can we just push out information and train other people and create a whole network of people educating each other. And I'm beginning to see it happen. You know, we're beginning to have, and that's part of what we want to do. There's no reason any one group or person needs to hold the information and the resources, right? So let's build the whole thing, because we happen to be able to funnel resources, and that is, you know, it's been kind of a humbling experience for me to have, you know, to be in this position, because I'm not that person that goes out and just goes after and goes after and goes after. I'm not the person that is working the high dollar, this and that and the other. So the hope I see is in the things that are taking their life and living into it themselves, which is good, because I'm ready to, like, pass torches and go. There's other things I want to do in my life. And some of it has to do with other projects around land access and urban conservation easements and things like that. Let's get it out to other people.
Wow. Y'all probably use one of my least favorite words is hope. I feel like sometimes hope is kind of empty. You know what I mean? And yeah, when did I start believing in the work is what I'm going to use. I mean, that, because that just speaks more to me, but is through the conversations with folks, you know, when the community members actually express concern and care about the process or the lack of service or being impacted, you know, that's telling me that we're working with the right people because they give a damn. You know what I mean? They care about what's happening and what's not happening. And so it's like I can believe in those people more than I can hope. You know, so hope is kind of empty to me. And everybody may not believe in that approach, and I'm sorry, some people disagree, but it's like I can't live on hope. Hope won't feed me. You know what I mean? But if I can believe in my neighbor, my community, etc., and see them moving and accomplishing and believing in themselves, then as I can believe in what the job I'm doing and why I'm in this position. So, you know, that's where my belief in this work comes from is those conversations, the relationships that we're developing. Our county executive director is like, you know, her approach, the conversations, being able to be accessible and have dialogue, and the challenging dialogues, you know, gives me belief in this opportunity that the USDA is doing. You know, having the Cooperator conversations gives me belief that, you know, we can shift things and change things. You know, getting transparency in the office hours with the USDA about this program gives me belief and helps me believe that, like, we can really make urban ag a part of the ag ecosystem. It's not a stepchild. It's been happening. It's feeding people, etc. But you know, we have to let go of that and really see the value. And then one of the things we have to understand is the folks in urban ag, at the heart of it, the trauma, the challenges that they've gone through is going to create innovative solutions. It's going to create a lot of creative opportunities, and also hopefully embrace what has been at the core of the urban communities in the past, and that's that village mentality. You know, that connecting piece, that growing piece, that community piece. So that's what gives me my belief in this work, you know? And so it's like, you know, for those of you that believe in hope, you know, thank you, I appreciate you, but it's like, let's believe in us. Let's believe in the person that's sitting beside of you. Let's believe in the person across the room from you. Let's believe in the person on the other end of the application and build that trust and relationship so that they can believe in you. And then I think we can do so much more together, and we can move further together than we can alone. So that's where my belief holds and stands.
I think Gary should have said on the end, because I don't know how to follow that. I think when I'm thinking about this, I think a bit more about optimism than hope. And working in policy and politics, optimism is hard to keep. So it's definitely a choice to try to stay optimistic in the face of political turmoil. But I think a time that I felt the optimism was in the last Farm Bill, when I was just sort of transitioning out of being an urban farmer and becoming a parent, and getting an Office of Urban Ag and a Farm Bill. As you know, coming from commodity country, rural America, and then seeing how much, when you talk to your neighbors at the farmer's market and you talk to people who are asking why a tomato costs that much and talking about the work behind growing food, that's optimistic, those conversations, those relationships. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind. But I think in a political sense, you know, politics is weaved into the fabric of everyday life, whether people want to see that or believe that, in a lot of places. And so, especially in urban agriculture, we understand that politics is going to drive a lot of how we access services. And so working with local city council members or having advocates at the state level or the federal level, I'm hopeful about the fact that people are more aware and able to have these conversations about growing food in cities, growing food, you know, wherever you can, and changing permits and zoning. That's going to drive a lot of the optimism and the hope, I think, for the future of agriculture in general. But also that, we want to teach people how to grow food, and in the city, you have access to more people. And so being able to connect and be in community with one another, there are just some amazing people who are doing that work all over the country and all over the world, and we're not going to be able to change the future of food and the future of how we consume food and take care of our earth without having those conversations.
You made me think of another conversation that I've been able to be part of. I have a farmer friend who has had the resources to build a gathering space on their farm. And so she is intentionally hosting various dinners. And she's in, so Dallas-Fort Worth is a really big area, and then from Dallas, the development goes north. And McKinney is about 30 miles north of Dallas, and it was its own town, and now the Metroplex, the suburbs have grown out to meet it. And it is wealthy. I've referred it, never mind, that comment won't make sense in here. It was a Dallas-based comment. They are not without food access issues in their community, but there is a lot of wealth. And so they have they just have a different ecosystem up there, and I've said that out loud about things. But what I've been able to be part of are these conversations with the eaters, with the people that have the money to buy the local food, to talk with them about why it's so important that we have community-based food production, resilient food systems, and small local businesses that care about the community. And, I've been seeing a lack of that. I don't know about y'all, but in my part of the country, we are not talking about the food system as a whole and why the whole thing is important. We've kind of gone back into the work a little bit, and we're not talking about it to the eaters as much anymore, to the people who can help continue to change the systems because they have the dollars to shift in bigger ways. I think communities that are growing for their community because of access issues are going to continue to do that. But we have a whole other opportunity as well to shift other parts of cities and increase the farm viability for a lot of other farmers. We have farmers 50, 100 miles outside of Dallas that are selling into Dallas. And so how can I help those farmers as well have the market? And part of it is really getting into why community is important. In Dallas, convenience, in the big DFW Metroplex, convenience usually is preferred over community. And we need community to make us healthier and more stable and resilient and care about each other.
Well, they're all looking at me as if I have an answer. I want to say thank you for sharing your truths. I mean, this is work that I think many of us would agree to some extent that it is far from transactional, and it requires acknowledging that your cells show up. You have to be fed somehow. However you consider that into your internal self. And that may be belief, that may be value, that may be optimism, it may be hope. It may be none of those words. And you are the author of your own story. And so however that shows up for you is really the point, right? And so thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. I think you all could share that in your own words, and I think that's kind of what to me makes urban agriculture, the story of urban agriculture, really, really significant. And I kind of wanted to ask one more question before we go into the audience, thinking about the work that you're currently doing in your organization. And I'm thinking bigger than broader than just the cooperative agreement projects, because not everyone in this conference has a cooperative agreement. And some of you may be wondering, what is that and why does that even matter? And it does matter, But I think more importantly what matters is that there is a long history of urban agriculture, urban food making and sharing and storytelling that has really made this part of the world really important. And that story connects to other parts of the world. And so I'm wondering if you could share about, from your place and time right here and right now, how are you thinking about moving the urban ag work that you're doing? Like, I don't want to ask, like, what's the sustainability plan? But, it kind of is in that vein. But really, how do you foresee in 5-10 years from now, from where you see your work in New Orleans, your work in Dallas, your work in the Twin Cities, your work across California? What would that sustainability look like for you if you move on, or if you're still there? What would that look like, and help perhaps others are thinking about their sustainability in the spaces and communities that they're in?
I know I have the mic, but I have to think about this question a little, so if anybody,
Because I am actually thinking about these things and what is it going to be, and being an organizational founder, there's lots of negative things that can happen, right? And I'm really been working on myself for a while now to not be that founder. But how can I step, how can we leave a legacy? Whatever Grow North Texas ends up being is going to be, but what do we vision, what do we want us to try to develop as we have these opportunities to do? And I really hope to see, there are some burgeoning projects led by people of color that we have not had before in the same way. And it is wonderful to see that finally taking hold. Dallas has a very strange racial justice history. We did not have a civil rights movement. It was actively kept away for different factors. There's a book called, if you're really interested, there's a book called The Accommodation that I highly recommend. There's some others, City of Hate, all kinds of things about Dallas. But those factors have played into how our leadership is in communities of color. And I've tried to understand it as best I can, and I see the beauty of, that is, the things like are present in Detroit are beginning to be present in Dallas. And I'm excited that that's happening. And I don't know what else to say after that. I don't know how I feel about it. But it is wonderful to see. And so then what are the other systems that need to shift? What are the supports that need to be in place? What do we need to do at the city? What do we need? Because we do need work at our city level and our county level. We're not terrible at right now, but it needs work. And looking at those structures that are going to help maintain what's happening. What's the land access going forward going to be like? How can we, set those things in motion to continue the building of what is beginning to be?
All right, thank you. First, the organization I'm with was not in urban ag originally. They were white-led organization in position and relationship to get the cooperative agreement. So with that is the approach of really listening to the community and centering the community has allowed us to really build the relationships that would even give me the right to even think about sustainability and beyond the grant. So first short term is, what are the elements that are going to remain after this initiative if we're not funded beyond the 3 years? So that would be my first look. What can we leave within the community that the community can steward, steer, guide, and connect with? And then is there going to be a relationship when we remove ourselves or we're removed from the conversation between the community and FSA? Is there this engagement and sustainability and feedback loop that the community will have irregardless of what our presence is, And so that's one of the things is that's number one is what can we put in place beyond the grant? But then as we're building these relationships, we're listening and connecting with community and really giving them the voice through even reviewing the grants and identifying what's beneficial, what's not, what makes sense, what doesn't, and using the community, the farmers and producers as experts, but as, what infrastructure is going to be there. So as we have this communication feedback loop, and so how do we break down the ISO, what's it called? Silos, not ISO, but break down the silos so that folks are truly communicating, and working together, because you have these different pockets, you have these clusters, these hubs. Another unfavorite word is resiliency, because anytime they say you're resilient, they put the thumb down on you more, and then it's like you got to work harder, and so then I think that stills hope. So is you got to believe in each other, next person next to you, to overcome those things in order to truly say that you're resilient and that you can believe in your neighbor, your community, to do these things. So it's like really those things, breaking down the silos, leaving pieces and components of infrastructure in place that the community can steward and connect with and hold on to when everything else is gone. Because again, this work was here before the USDA stepped in. So it's like, and then my next thing is we're so early on, and I've talked about this before. Do we need to pivot? Do we need to be agile? Do we need to be adaptive, and not just accept the status quo of this is the way business has been done, but this is the way business can be done? And I think that's what's going to be important. And those are the things that I'm looking forward and I'm going to speak towards, and I'm hoping that my team speaks towards it. They seem to be in support, you know what I mean? Because I'm up here talking to them like, okay, go ahead, Gary, do your thing. But I feel like that's where we're at, and so is, and the next thing is beyond this, it's like each one of us, we're all dealing with what? USDA, state, county, municipality, you know what I'm saying? So is all those same structures are in place everywhere. How do we have that conversation amongst cooperators to look at this through a national lens, to look at this through a lens of collectively organizing and aggregating our knowledge, resources, and talents, so that the mayors understand, the legislators understand, those decision makers understand what we're saying, what we're doing, and what matters. So that's where I'm at with it. And I think we can do that if we all stand in our truths, and then we also choose to be brave and speak up.
What I will say about sustainability is a lot of it can't happen without money. So I think the government and USDA and FSA being able to give partners like us, the cooperators, money to give to farmers is going to make a big difference. The micro grants that we're giving out, $10,000 goes a long way for an urban farm, especially if you're starting and you don't have a lot of proof to paper of things that you've been doing profitability wise. So building infrastructure, getting, wash stations or cold storage or, a hoop house, that's going to go a long way. So I think, we in California have really great USDA partners, and they're coming to these relationships understanding the historical injustices that have been done through lending in communities of color. And so the Farm Service Agency, I think, in general, is going to have a bit of an uphill climb to get into communities and be allies, but I'm seeing that is coming about from a good place in California. So I think the federal government, for all of its issues, we're paying our taxes into it, and that money needs to be going, back to initiatives like the Office of Urban Ag and being able to give these directly to farmers. They know what to do with the money. And so part of it for us is we're not doing a lot of oversight of like what your project is. Like, we want to give you that money and we want you to run with it and do the things that are going to make a difference in your community, because I'm not going to tell you how to do that. But sustainability wise, like, none of this is, we're not going to be able to help small farmers. We're not going to keep family farmers on the land if they don't have any money to stay there, especially as prices and cost of living, we've had these conversations. And the fact, like, in the last session, Kiana mentioned that New York City's department, their ag department doesn't have funding from the city, and other, food policy councils don't have funding. So we put together a food vision, we put together a food action plan, but there's no money to implement it. That's not sustainable. So I think in general, trying to continue to advocate and understanding the politics behind some of the policies that we're trying to do at the local and state and federal levels will hopefully help to keep these things in motion and give them money and keep growing food and keep growing these programs.
Just one more thing. As we're talking about sustainability, one of the greatest things that we can do is the transfer of knowledge and understanding so that the communities can take charge and continue the relationships of connecting and navigating, but then is making sure that we're training up the trainers and leaving that knowledge in the communities, because then through their own self-determination, they can identify their own pathway of self-sufficiency. And so yes, it comes down to resources, but then I'm going to use resilient. If there's a will, there's a way. And individuals who need and want and desire through self-determination will figure out that will and way, whether it's financed or not. That's why urban ag has been happening anyway, before the financing came about.
Right, for sure.
So thank y'all so much. And why I kind of needed a minute with that question is because my brain kind of took it into, like, it was like the future of urban ag, and I was like, oh, like I was like Sprout, like I was like in New Orleans. So I kind of thought about that question from two perspectives, and one is like as far as the city and like, surrounding parishes goes, the work that we're doing now will hopefully in the future, right? Money, organizations, things happen all the time, right? So like, ideally, what we've accomplished in the city will just continue to happen, and heaven forbid anything happens to the organizations that are around right now. 10 years from now, that work will continue. We got an urban ag liaison position seated in the city, which was like a huge deal. We looked to a lot of the organizations, shout out to Atlanta, but looked to other places that have an urban, have that, and because New Orleans did not. And it is a city, like, the mayor signed off to like have that be a city position, and it's in the city budget, which is like a huge deal. That campaign is 10 years long. It was four planks to that specific campaign that we ran. And one of the planks was an urban ag liaison position, and they're hiring for that now. So that's like the start. We also got USDA. We have a composting grant with the USDA that's starting. Now I can't wait to go. I'm like, this is a conference, but I'm like, woo! Yeah, it did. But and that again is also just taking the work that people have been doing for years and like just getting these small things that have been happening for a long time recognized on a city level. And like then throughout the state and then federally, et cetera, right? So those are some ways in which urban agriculture will continue to grow in New Orleans. And as far as my organization goes, what we do for sustainability, of course, constantly grant writing and like, it's always looming at the top of a nonprofit's head is like, oh, next year's budget. But yeah, when's the grant deadline? Is the reporting to be we meet the requirements for the reporting, like all, that whole story. But what Sprout is working towards is community run organization, right? Like down the line where it's community, like where we don't have to rely so heavily on foundations and government. Of course, we're going to have to, right? But right now where we're at, where it's like we heavily rely on federal governments and on foundation money, right? But like the goal is to get us to a place where like enough people feel supported by, enough people feel, I don't want to say in love with, but like they feel really connected to our mission, to the work that we do, to our values, and that they feel ownership in it so that they want to donate to it, or that they have someone that they know that wants to donate to it, right? Like the goal is to become community funded, and or at least majority community funded, you know, and we'll still have grants, because then that takes the pressure off, and it also makes people excited about your work and what you're doing, and we're working towards that goal. You know, last year we as a staff came together and we realized through a lot of like sheets on the wall and a lot of writing, we realized that the most important thing to our organization are the people that we work with, that we work for, and you know, so building out our customer relationships, of course, like technical assistance will always be what we do, but we're also right now working towards like really honing in like on our customer relationship. It's saying customer because it's a CRM, but not obviously not customers. We're not selling anything, but like, you know, just working toward to like not just to be able to like tailor our messaging to each person, right? I think that's important to the work that we do, is like not only like I just feel as if like it's important to be able to communicate with the people in the best way that's possible for them, right? Like we're a really big email organization. Not everybody's an email person, like or a phone call, but like, are you a texter? Do you want a phone call? Like some people hate the phone, some people love the phone. Like just trying to figure out like the ways in which to talk to people the best way that's possible for them. And I think that through these small steps over time, so that heaven forbid anything happens to like this director, that director, this staff member moves on, that Sprout itself is like recognized and cherished and loved, and also like a lot of transparency in like the work that we do. We have a lot of committees, you know, you can ask us a lot of questions, like, you know, so that people understand like how Sprout works and operates, so that someone else can like take it over or do something if they need to, so that the work that Sprout does is always able to keep going and not dependent on like our staff necessarily. So that's how we're trying. We're doing it.
Yeah. Thank you all. I'm going to, Rajane, thank you so much. She is going to run the microphone. I have a bum ankle, so I'm not going to be very good at that. So Rajane is going to have the microphone, so I'll let her take it on to have folk ask questions.
I'll start here.
Good afternoon, and I love your final remarks because that was the very point I was about to make. My name is Betty Jo Tompkins. I'm from Tampa Bay, Florida, and we are not among the 27 cities that have been part of the entire program. So I believe there's really two distinct elements within urban ag. One element would be community gardens, school gardens, 501c3s, etc. The second is the urban farmer who's there as an economic enterprise. And I think it's very true that we do need the government's support, and that does need to continue. But what I've heard nothing about this conference until you just said it, and that is the private sector. We fund almost exclusively through the private sector. There are hundreds of millions of dollars out there that foundations and organizations are willing to give if they believe the program, project, or activity is viable. And I want to just use one simple example. Rotary International, which probably most of you have heard of, is the largest professional civic organization worldwide. They just added a couple years ago the environment as their 7th annual avenue of service. Women and children is one, healthcare is another, and that was the polio movement, etc. But now they've added the environment. Every Rotary club everywhere in the country, and in the world for that matter, has funds that they generate from their events, some of which they certainly will give to community gardens, school gardens, etc. We started a program a few years ago called the Hillsborough 100 Conservation Challenge. Our urban agriculture is far larger because we tie in the theme of conservation is everybody's business. And the Hillsborough 100 is 100 conservation projects, most of which are agriculturally oriented, but they're done by youth and adults every spring. And we have a number of events for the kids, adults, etc., festivals and all these things. And we try to convince people that eating in a close proximity, in other words, the Fresh from Florida program is hugely successful, and we're selling urban agriculture. But I wish that everybody would think beyond just the government funding, because we talk about the Farm Bill. Folks, take a good look at the Farm Bill. Over 80% of it goes directly to food stamps. Less than 20% goes to every other agricultural program. And that can get really, really tight in there. So we want to keep pushing, but at the same time go after the private sector money. So I don't know how much you all get, and that's what I'd like to know, is the four speakers up there, what percentage of your funds come from the private sector?
I'll speak to that first. If anybody else wants to comment, you can. Welcome to, obviously. But in Dallas, our challenge is that food systems, local agriculture food systems is not a funding priority to local foundations. There are very few places that we can get funding through local foundations. Now, our program that connects families with WIC benefits to the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, that's a food access, it's kids, nutrition, that, maybe we can go there. Except in Dallas, it is very status quo in nonprofit governance. And standard nonprofit governance perpetuates the systems of patriarchy and oppression, right? So they look at who is on my board and their affiliations. They want to know certain demographic information. They want to know our budget, our entire organizational budget and our project budget. They want to know if we have audited financials, yada, yada, yada. I go to USDA, they care not a whit about who's on my board. They care not a whit about my entire organizational budget. They want to know the project budget. They want to know who's going to be doing it. Do you have good partnerships? Are you experienced in the work? And have you built a program that sounds like it can work? And I appreciate that because Grow North Texas would not exist without the USDA dollars. Are we working on local foundations? Sure, we're trying to crack that. Are some of our programs, like our Community Orchard program, has done well with other organizations. We get a lot of corporate volunteers at our urban farm. But in terms of funding agriculture, the actual agriculture and food systems work, it is very difficult in most places in the country. There are certain places where it's easy, and I agree that community groups are often a great place for some dollars, but it can be an uphill climb in other ways for organizations. Anybody else?
Real quick, our organization, we do get, for some of our programs, not in particular this urban ag program, but that funding's coming from like Cargill, you know? I'm like, hey, you know what I mean? So there's these dynamics, like we really have to look at where do you take money from as well. So it's like, not all money is good money, but you know, that's not my decision. So I just want to put that out there. But it is funding that supports programs that are beneficial and impactful for the community at that. So I just wanted to point that out. But it is a challenge, but we're the taxpayers. Our money is there in the government. What if every urban ag initiative in every state was line itemed in for $1 to $2 million a year over the next 20 years? Now that's change. That's impactful. You know, that's an ask we can all make as well. as constituents and voters, et cetera, you know, and then is, why do we have to go ask other people for the money that's ours already? You know what I mean? So it's like, what's our collective voice going to be?
Hello, Tanya Holmes from Cleveland, Ohio, Kayla Hill and Garden Center, 14 years of urban farmer this month. Thank you for all the work you guys are doing, because it is not easy to be an urban farmer on the ground, also as a community organizer. So that being said, I was listening to you about sustainability. Well, I own just 1 acre, and on that 1 acre, in the 14 years we've been an urban farmer, to raise money, I started doing jazz in the garden, wine tastings, Juneteenth events, participate with the police department in my area. They come out and talk to the community about community stuff. So I started doing different events like that, and then people come to my space that never knew that the space was even there. I just hosted last week a garden tour. 40 extra people, I'm living in Cleveland, people were coming from like 60 miles just to come to this garden to see what we're doing. That being said, as far as finance is concerned, when we first started out in 2010, I just thought I was just wanting to grow some food for the family. But then after the second and third year, you're thinking, wow, this is a lot of work. We're going to do a little bit more. We got to figure out how to make some money off this. So I turned it into an LLC. As far as funding is concerned, I don't care where you look, from federal, state, and even local. When you look for grants, I don't look for loans. I don't deal with loans. I got a car note, that's enough. and house payments and stuff. So I try to deal with just grants and grants only. And I found that, yeah, the money is out there. I know what some of that money is. Billions and hundreds and thousands of dollars is out there, especially with the USDA, just to start off with. But they want you to be a 501c3. Here in Cleveland, where I live, my business is an LLC. I shouldn't have to partner with a nonprofit who's sitting in the office all day, and you're not in the field with the people, knowing what the people want, and I got to be use you as a fiscal agent. And then in order for me to get funding, then if I do get approved for the grant, I have to go through the nonprofit, and that take a month, and then they say, 30 days, and then they want to know what you're going to buy with it. I don't have time for that. So what I've done was I've taught people in Cleveland how to do fundraising, easy, simple, and how to go to the USDA and Farm Service Agency and get the high tunnel grant, get the pollinator grant, get the cover crop grant, and there's other little things like that, $5,000, $10,000, $4,000. You get those little bit of money, and now we're set up where we've had a humanitarian award, we've done Farmer of the Year for the state of Ohio. All these accolades came, and I'm thinking, where the hell did that come from? I just came out here to do the work, teach kids in our city that's out here doing nothing in the summertime, all the crime we got going on in Cleveland, and I'm sure around the country. So I, in the last 14 years, started getting some of youth kids the city pays them, well, the organization pays them in the summer, $13.50 an hour, and I signed up in January to be a host every year to get these kids to come and work and help do some of this work and teach the kids, you know what the eggplant look like? Some of these kids don't even know the darn eggplant look like, let alone taste one. So we teach them how to grow food, we teach them how to be entrepreneurs and things like that. Now, some of the kids never knew about the garden, never knew anything about gardening. Ask the kids, some of the boys, have you ever cut grass before? Some of them haven't cut grass before, so we teach them those things. You know what compost is? Start teaching them compost. Now I say, you can start a compost business, and I show them how to do that. So it's all, trying to get kids and volunteers to come out is so difficult, but I've learned in the last 14 years, when you start having programs that you know the kid's gonna like, or you have, even for adults, even my police officers was just painting my picnic tables last month. And then come out and volunteer. So thank you for what you guys do. And as far as funding is concerned, the bigger companies that's not state and federal, they give you money, but it's a long process. It's not that easy. And they want everybody to be a nonprofit. And you hear the people at the top in Washington every single day say, small business, we're for small business, we're for small business. But then when small business comes to you and say, can we get this $30,000 grant? They look at you like you're crazy. We just got one of the big grants in October. We're still waiting on our funding. $252,000. We're still waiting on our funding. Me and two other urban farmers. We asked for $352,000. They said they ran out of money. So it's not easy getting funding. I don't care from high or low, but if you can get those small grants, that's a start. And as far as long-term on my farm, as an LLC, as a business legacy, I have a 14-year-old that's with me in the hotel today. He's came to some of these events to catch on, legacy, talk about legacy. That's my legacy, because I'm 61, and I'm getting tired of cutting grass. I'm getting tired of bending on my knees. Them days is coming. So you try to teach the kids, you try to teach other people how to do the work. My long-term goal is to, on my whole acre, get a structure built and then use that structure as an Airbnb and open it up where people can come outside and participate. But the best way, if you have a green space, a garden center, garden space, urban farm, to raise money, it's always good to do events. Events go a long way. That's all I can help. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maddie. I'm coming from New Orleans, and as organizations that work within communities that you probably live in, maybe grew up in, or also became familiar with through your work, I'm curious because, community, broad definition, my thoughts are kind of going to disaster response. And, living in New Orleans and with climate change coming on, really heavy and quickly, I guess I'm curious how your organizations, since everyone's in a different state, if you can speak to any disaster response that your organization is working on, and maybe like how you're going about that. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Real quick. In Texas, we have started a statewide disaster relief fund that sits with the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. It was started actually with the Freeze-Mageddon in 2021. We got a bunch of, when the electricity grid failed and everybody nationally knew about it. So we have created a system with multiple organizations, of application system, review, and all that to help. That's one thing we've done.
Yeah, so CAF is moving probably about $3 million in disaster assistance this year that farmers are applying for, and then we move it out. So it's sort of coming to us from other entities, and then because we have the relationships and we know what's going on with small farmers, we're able to do that. And so, most of that isn't urban farmers really, but a lot of it has to do with, winter storms. The big floods were this year, and then last year, fires and droughts, and so it's always one way or the other. It's either too much water or not enough. And so a lot of the disaster relief in California has to do with water or fire. And so I think organizations trying to be ahead of the curve a little bit by integrating those programs of knowing what can we do in farming communities to try to mitigate some of those things, especially around wildfires in advance, and then being able to have a quick and strong response. So a lot of that has to do with funding, and a lot of it has to do with relationships with the state and the government to get that money and then push it through to farmers. And so that's a big project for a small organization to get checks out and get that money. But a lot of farmer stipends, a lot of farmers, we already have their information because we do stipends for, if you come to the Capitol to talk about something, we pay you. If you're, coming to be a fellow, we pay you. Like there's, that's always built into a funding mechanism, is stipends and paying people for their time, because as a farmer getting off the farm to do something else and using your voice in that capacity, your time is valuable. And so I think disaster relief and assistance, it comes with a bit of pre-planning instead of just being reactionary. But that's unfortunately, I think, going to just be a part of programs, especially for us in California always, because I think we're always going to be responding to a climate disaster.
I'll just say real quick, I'm not familiar with anything inside of the organization being new, but we do some things to mitigate climate issues. For instance, we're doing green screens mini forest, the Miyake method, to combat heat islands, in particular in the Rondo community in St. Paul. Went in at a historic black church, part of the Underground Railroad. They have an urban garden. And so a green screen went in, which is a mini forest of native plantings that went in to help combat heat islands. And then also within the co-op space, the Ajani group, we also do trainings for co-op businesses and cooperators in order to help them in climate planning and their resiliency planning as well. So not on the back end after disaster, but on the front end, hopefully heading into climate change and disaster prevention planning.
There's also stuff we've done around just being prepared. Like if you have animals, do you have the ability to move those animals? Or do you have somebody that's going to come with their trailer and you know where your chickens are going, you know where your goats are going, whatever it is? Or you know how you're building your farm for resiliency as well. Yeah, I've seen some cool things. So there are things people can do. Know that you got to take pictures first before you do any cleanup. You know, just those little things to be prepared for when something happens. You know where your documents are, da-da-da-da-da-da. But for farmers, right? Yeah, Nola, what have y'all done?
Well, we've had a disaster or two in New Orleans, but I think that, obviously, Maddie, you are familiar with the work that we do, but for everybody else, we have a navigator program where we are assisting farmers in getting themselves and their farms ready for when a disaster strikes. And, of course, there's a lot of coalitions and there's a lot of organizations and work in city government that is, prepared for hurricanes in New Orleans and Louisiana when those strike, of course. But something that happened last year that I think now shapes how we move forward with disaster is that, unfortunately, Louisiana is well versed in how to deal with a hurricane, right? We know how to mobilize when things happen. Community comes together and okay, who's got the solar cooler? Our facilities have a solar cooler that producers can put their food into. We've got an outdoor kitchen space, right? We have a sort of hub that can be a space for producers to just help keeping the food system thriving post disaster. But last year, we experienced extreme heat and drought, which is uncommon, right? So we know how to move through a disaster. We've got plans in place and there's enough folks that know what to do after a hurricane strikes. But last year it was really this idea, this moment of just kind of oh shit, we don't know, this is a different type of climate disaster that we're not used to. And that kind of threw you for a loop, right? When you're yeah, we know how to deal with disaster because it's Louisiana, we're good at this. And then we're oh no, no, oh no, we're not good at that. What the hell? Good farmers, how we cover crop in the summertime. We know how to deal with the heat. We're used to heat, but we're not used to drought. We're not used to no cloud coverage. We were not used to farmers weren't able to start seedlings in August like they typically were because there was no cloud coverage, right? It was so hot. And I'm not if you've ever been to Louisiana, New Orleans in the summertime, it's hot. Last year, we would break a record on a Monday, and then that Wednesday we'd break that record. We were breaking records that hadn't been broken in a couple years, and there was no rain, right? So I think from that has moved our organization and how we think about disaster and what a disaster is, and instead of disaster, which we'll always do, right? If something happens, we'll always hop on that acute fixing. Okay, cute. It's here, we got to do it. But now we're working through climate change building. We had a climate convening that came it was in January, and it was the Louisiana Farmers Climate Convening that came from producers in last year being I don't have the proper irrigation. I don't have water, things that they just weren't used to having to handle. And so moving forward now we're thinking through ways of introduce, of course we always were climate smart ag and that, of course, right? But now it's oh no, we really have to tap into not like coming at climate from a way that we don't anticipate. And I think that's been something that our newest disaster, trials and tribulations, it's fun. It's fun in the Gulf South.
Well, I don't want to end on a disastrous note, but so I'm gonna first, let's just it is important. Obviously, urban agriculture, the message is urban agriculture clearly plays a role in understanding and participating in climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And thank you for the question, because it makes us think about that sustainability. So I appreciate that for all of us. So please, I have a couple points. First, please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you all for your time today, and for all of you. I see many of you in this audience who I know have a long, very rooted history in urban agriculture, and I think we all owe each other that kind of recognition. So I just want to take a moment and thank you. I also want to encourage those individuals who are Cooperator, one of the 17 plus 10. We are going to be having a Cooperator networking meeting at 4:30. There will be snacks and refreshments to network with, and we have USDA William Cruz will be there to help moderate with myself and my colleague Katie Trezzo. So that is for cooperators only. Everyone else has their evening on their own. That will go from 4:30 to 6. That'll be in the ballroom. Just want to kind of encourage that's in your agenda. And last but not least, I heard from someone in the audience that someone has a birthday today, and that someone is sitting right there. So it's happy birthday to Susie.
All right, real quick, let's go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Susie. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
And that is the correct note to end on.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all so much.